Too late.
I do think it's.
It looks like 9:30.
Now we're gonna see.
Kitchen at the Dean's open until like forever. I've gotten food there at like super late.
Refuge. Well, they have labor problems going on.
So I feel like I've eaten there.
Just go do it.
Well, that was the old days.
Motion's on the table.
I'm not going.
I'm just.
Usually don't say anything about being quiet in regards to things like that. So I think like just
Okay, Nicole, fair enough. All right, Amy, you ready? Are we live? Oh. All right, we are back on record. It's 8:27. No decisions were made in executive session. Mac, you want to kind of well, we have a motion on the floor on this that Scott made to do really what's in the agenda, the $232,000, apply for the grant, so forth. We've got a second. We've had conversation in executive session. We've had some discussion publicly, and I know we've got some next steps that we need to take. So, Mac, do you want to kind of outline parts of that?
Yeah, just depending on what council does, let's just assume that something gets approved tonight. That doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. We've obviously got to wait for the permit to be issued. As we did with Wild Dunes and other renourishment projects, there'll be some paperwork that we'll have to get the affected landowners to sign, easement agreements, et cetera. And so it would realistically probably be a month, I would say, until there's any real action or anyone sees any action, depending on how council votes.
Question.
Yeah, when we say affected homeowners, are we talking about just the ones that were mapped on the chart, or are we talking about everybody that lives on Ocean?
Well, it depends on the nature of and scope of the project, but to the extent a dune is being renourished in front of that homeowner's house, we would ask that they sign the agreement.
And I guess the permit, did it define, it was 100 to 500 block
Yeah, to between the fourth and fifth block
from breach?
from breach.
To there.
Correct, from first.
And the idea is we got to get the trucks on the beach. There's going to be heavy equipment pushing stuff up onto what is, currently their property. So we just need to make sure we button all that stuff up.
Mayor, the permit distance is different than the 1,500-foot distance suggested by CSE. So it's two different reaches of the beach.
Question or?
Well, do we want to talk about the public trust doctrine and what happens as a result of a berm being built?
Happy to address that, but the law is essentially if you get a permitted structure and build it and it accretes, in other words, creates additional land, think of the Sullivan's Island Maritime Forest, for example, that property after you would renourish the beach becomes the property of the state under the public trust doctrine per statute.
So each homeowner who currently owns to the high water mark, their land would stop at the built berm, at the new berm.
Correct, and the city would have an easement over that dune. It wouldn't be like the city could put it up and the landowner can just decide to dig it up 2 weeks later.
And this is by statute that exists in the state right now.
That is correct.
Thank you.
But that also means that any landscaping or any other artificial structures that aren't allowed, other than a pool or whatever, would not be able to be restored or rebuilt in that area either when it's replenished.
Correct, yeah. So assume a pool washed away, for example, and we put a dune in its place. They couldn't later put a pool on top of that dune.
Okay.
Blair, did you get your question answered?
I did,
Okay,
sir.
good. Other questions? Kevin, before we go further, you got a question are you trying to jump in?
All right.
Go ahead, Desiree. Okay, thank you, Kevin.
I
Desiree.
just want to clarify the original motion that it included to approve the project as for the 232 and pursue grant
Yes.
monies to cover 50%. So that's included in
But
your motion?
not to make a contingent upon.
Got it.
Rusty?
I got one other point to make before we make a vote. It just seems to me that with the properties we're talking about, they are close to the critical area here. It would be much more beneficial to a homeowner to have sand scraping done in the interim to replenish this without having the risk of losing their rights to the high tide mark, to the mean high tide mark in the future. So, I mean, if it comes in, the Army Corps of Engineers comes in and replenishes the beach in 9 to 12 months, nothing changes for those homeowners over and above what it, I mean, right? Is that correct? The Army Corps of Engineers replenishment project, when they come in and do that, nothing changes for the homeowner. They have the same property rights they've always had to the high tide mark, and I guess that is a Stephen question.
Yeah, as far as I understand the project, as they have discussed it, they would only place sand in the intertidal area. It would be up to the city to decide whether to take some of that sand and restore the dune should it be needed at that point. If you do restore the dune at that point, two potential things could happen, and this isn't legal advice, but it's if that is a constructed project, then the landward end of that dune where it was built now becomes a public trust, as far as I understand that. However, if that dune becomes the new primary dune, then OCRM will likely set the new baseline and setback lines based off of that new dune's position, which they're going to do anyway. They update that every 18 years.
So I think we would be in the same position, Councilmember Streetman, if we decide to take advantage of that large project from the Corps and push sand to restore the dune at that time, we'd be facing the same need that
To have
we
easements.
consider. Correct.
Yeah. Because again, Stephen, to your point, the Army Corps project is really placing sand on the beach, not a berm, unless the city decides to, or the dune
As
decides
they
to
have
push it
discussed
there.
it with me, it would just be a beach fill, which eventually that sand would work itself up to the
Right.
dune. But to jumpstart that and kind of do it as a comprehensive, plan and design, then yeah, we would look at supplementing. If it's accreted naturally, or if we do a project in the interim and that's still there, then we may not need to do that.
Yeah. And if you had a recent conversation with Army Corps, I mean, they're still down this path and timing and,
Spoke with them yesterday. They are still on this path. They're going to send us a draft of the design in the next couple of weeks that I think they said it's like a 65%, but they're looking at they hope to be constructing towards the end of this year, or it sounds more likely like the beginning of next year.
But one more question, and I'm not sure who this is for, but the trucking, full trucking, half trucking, scraping, all three of those would require the same paperwork with the owners and everything, and the changes and the easement and everything else.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
So that's, I think
Okay.
Rusty was saying that wasn't the case, but scraping is the same as trucking when it comes to the land.
that's right.
Public trust document.
No matter what option.
Yeah, it's all deemed a permitted structure
Thank you.
under
Yeah.
the statute.
Good clarification. Desiree, any other? I
No.
thought you were getting ready to say something.
No.
Other questions, comments? We got a motion and a second. Nicole, you want to do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Bogosian?
Aye.
Councilmember Hahn?
Aye.
Councilmember Myers?
Aye.
Councilmember Ward?
Aye.
Councilmember Streetman?
Aye.
Councilmember Popson? Councilmember Anderson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pierce?
Aye.
Mayor Pounds?
Aye.
Your motion passes.
Thank you. Good conversation, thank you. Stephen and Patrick, thank you guys for hanging in
you.
there with us.
Just fell off.
Purposely. Next item is consideration of recommendation from the Planning Commission to approve proposal from Seaman and Whiteside for the development of a sea level rise adaptation plan in the amount of $35,300, and you can see where that's budgeted from. Douglas, anything to add before we
No.
go further on this one?
Talked about this
We
at the
talked about it at
workshop.
workshop. Yep, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second. Any further questions or comments? Jan?
I would just like to ask Desiree to repeat what she said at the workshop about why we selected this group.
So the city issued an RFP, Planning Commission interviewed all two proposers. They made a recommendation for the city to go with the lowest cost. They believe that both were equally competent to be able to prepare to do the work. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, the scoring from the planning commission was basically even. It was a couple of points different. This proposer came in significantly cheaper. So they recommended to go with.
We do,
Hey,
we
we got
do,
you back
our,
if you wanna stay on.
the
You can
two
stay on.
main project managers for this firm
Yeah.
were the
We're working
were the
through the rest
folks
of the agenda. This ought to
that
go pretty quick.
prepared the city's master plan, drainage master plan. So I think they have a unique understanding of the city's needs, and when it comes to drainage, that I think would be very beneficial for the development of this more comprehensive project.
So they're more familiar with the Isle of Palms and its conditions, and therefore submitted a significantly lower estimate because of, they already know the area.
Could assume that, yes. Why?
Thank you.
All right, we've had conversation, motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next item is consideration of recommendation from the Public Services and Facilities Committee to approve proposal from Applied Technology Management for the engineering, design, and permitting of marina dredging project in the amount of $104,500. And again, you can see where that is coming from.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item E, consideration and approval of purchase of 16 ballistic vests for fire department personnel in an amount not to exceed $28,000 to be funded by the $150,000 approved allocation to enhance emergency response and beach safety.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next, consideration and approval of purchase of 4 tide valves for Merritt Boulevard, be 2 there, Driftwood Lane and Carolina Boulevard in the amount of $35,520 to be funded by drainage contingency.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Questions? Douglas, any idea how fast these can get installed?
I know that they can be delivered relatively quickly. I don't know, when we did this, they were in stock. I don't know exactly how quickly. Our staff is anticipating doing the installation.
Okay.
I don't know how quickly. It probably would be in
In
the
a
fall.
month.
I would think in the fall.
Fall, okay.
I mean, they're busy.
I mean, these
now.
are immediate impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, true, we got,
But we'll have them in stock and, ready to go to work. But
got it.
I think it would be the
Okay.
fall.
Okay.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. These next 2 items we have not discussed in workshop. Consideration and approval of purchase of public works truck with increased towing capacity and utility body in an amount of $72,746.22 from Daniel Chevrolet to be funded by hospitality tax, public works capital outlay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
So this
Desiree?
item is included in the FY24 budget. It is slightly over budget to the number that we had estimated when the budget was approved. We have found a vendor in the state of Georgia that has this truck available. The other availability, we're looking at 6 to 8 months of lead time for construction, so we're requesting approval here. The city's procurement code does allow us to go with a vendor that beats the state contract pricing, and this does by about $2,000. So we would be within our procurement code to approve, for city council to approve this, and we would be able to get it quick to the department because it's in stock in Georgia.
Gotcha. Because it sounded like the backlog was 6+ months for an in-state,
Correct.
state-approved person.
So we recommend approval, and again, plan for in the budget, slightly over budget, but I know we can make up that difference in another line item.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Last, consideration of agreed-upon procedure for Marina Restaurant to meet lease requirements of Section 302C regarding statement of gross sales. We touched on this during the financial report in our workshop, and you had this in your packet. If we have a motion and a second, we can get to discussion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Desiree, anything to add here?
In your packet, there's a memo that we kind of explained what the current marina restaurant lease requires as to a statement certified by an accountant of the gross sales, gross revenues of the restaurant, and they report that every month, as you all know, to the city. We have received a proposal from the restaurant, the agreed-upon procedures that are included in your packet, as their intent to meet the requirements of that section. Because the lease requires, or the lease language includes some statement where they are required to have a certified accountant certify them as true and correct, that, according to the AOP and the restaurant, that would require a full audit. They've proposed an AOP, again, that you have in your packet. We've revised that with our auditor and with our real estate attorney, and they do believe that what they're proposing would meet the intent of what we requested in the lease. We just want to make sure that council agrees with that before we accept that as their intent to meet the requirements of the lease. I don't want to be 30 years, away from today and people questioning why the city accepted that as part of that requirement in Section 302. Want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and on board with that.
And is that something that will continue, move it, because it's not changing the language of the lease? Are we going to readdress this every year? Or
No,
is this- okay.
if you all
It's kind
take.
of setting policy
good.
now.
Correct. If
Yeah.
you accept this AUP, this would be the same process that they would follow at the end of their year and provide the same information to the city.
Scott?
It seemed to me from the workshop that Debbie had reviewed this, was okay with it, you're okay with it, their representatives were okay with it, it's tying to the tax returns.
Kit's had as well, Scott.
Yeah.
Brian Kitts.
Yeah, so it seems like it's all buttoned up and acceptable to everybody. I guess,
And
just
if-
want to reiterate that.
If we see any discrepancies with the report, we can certainly have the right to request for additional information or additional procedures. That's something that's still available to the city.
That is
Jan.
in the report. That is, I was thinking, do we want to just say have a full audit every 5 years or 10 years or something like that in there?
That would require an amendment to the
That's an
lease.
amendment.
Okay.
That's why we're adopting this, and to Katie's question, this is policy going forward for this lease.
That's a good process. It's acceptable.
Yeah, for a motion.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item 7, boards and commission reports. Board of Zoning Appeals, no meeting in June. Planning Commission, minutes are attached. Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee, no meeting in June. Environmental Advisory Committee, the minutes are attached. Item 8, ordinances, resolutions, and petitions, second readings. Ordinance 2023-02 to regulate e-bikes and battery-assisted motorized skateboards on the beach. This is second reading.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the ordinance, or is this not the time to do that?
Motion to
Yeah.
approve it first, and then we
Okay.
can amend it. So, sorry. Procedures.
No,
Go ahead.
I get it.
So we need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Scott.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to amend to eliminate the time and just to prohibit the e-bikes on the beach during the high season from Memorial Day to Labor Day. We have a 10 to 5 clause in there now, and I'd like to have that eliminated so that we don't have any of these these e-bikes or motorized vehicles out on the beach. I'm asking for that because the time of day that we're talking about, if you go out there on any weekend before 10 o'clock, the beach is packed, the county lot is already packed. I think anybody walking up and down the beach will see that there's a lot of toddlers, there's a lot of pets, a lot of activity on the beach, and these electronic bikes now can do up to, some of them at the high performance can do up to 70 miles an hour. I have definitely seen them doing 40 miles an hour on the beach. The frequency is much higher. They're a lot of fun. I ride them, I enjoy them. I just don't think they're conducive with the high season with pedestrians and beachgoers on the beach in high density at all. So I would like to amend that.
So the amendment is to remove the current language that says between the hours of 10 a.m. through 5 p.m. from May 15th to Labor Day, and replace it with between Memorial Day and Labor Day.
Yes.
You have to have a second.
And I was just
Second.
restating the motion. Second.
Second.
So
Thanks
no
for
hour
clarifying.
limitation, and then,
Just-
but still limit them 24/7 between Labor Day and Memorial Day and Labor Day.
yeah.
And I know at Public Safety Committee, there was a look at what other communities were doing. Desiree, do you mind kind of running back through that for the broader
Sure.
council? Just so everybody's on the same page.
So the town of Sullivan's Island, I reached out to my counterparts across to Sullivan's Island, Kiowa, Folly Beach, North Myrtle Beach, and Edisto. Across the board, they prohibit them on the beach at any time. They use different sections of their code to justify that, but essentially, they all do. Edisto does not allow any motorized scooters or e-bikes on the beach. Town of Kiowa Island prohibits them on roads and bike paths as well. Mostly they're private. Folly Beach follows the federal guidelines that define a motor vehicle. They're prohibited on the beach. And then Sullivan's Island, scooters and e-bikes are only prohibited on the beach. So pretty consistent across the board. The only difference is North Myrtle Beach has some hours during the day and times of the day and times of the year where they limit them.
Gotcha. Questions, comments?
One thing just to add, I know we
Oh,
got
sorry,
some
Matt.
citizens' comments expressing concern, saying that we couldn't regulate it, but there's a state statute directly on point, 56.5.710, that allows local authorities to regulate the operation of bicycles, including requiring, registration, licensing, et cetera. So I think this is fully within y'all's power to regulate these, your police powers. But that said, I would suggest that some of the issues you brought up, safety concerns, toddlers being on the beach, the fact that these things can exceed 30 miles an hour and present a safety hazard, with your amendment, I would suggest that we add some more of those factual findings just to establish why during busy times these are not permitted on the
To
beach.
the ordinance?
To the ordinance,
Matt.
yes. They're not currently in there, but I
Whereas.
would suggest that many of the things you said be included in a whereas now.
I will
therefore.
amend my motion to ask to
Can we-
include those items.
Can
if
we
I
do
need to.
that and still get it
Do second
into
reading?
second reading, or does it?
You
need to be-
can
Okay.
approve an ordinance for second reading as amended, if the amendment passes by the body.
Okay.
You could do that, or you could defer it so that you can see it, see the actual whereas language before you vote on it. It's really up to y'all.
I'm comfortable with just going ahead.
Yeah. Jimmy?
Did you say that local municipalities, did you use the language of licensing? Is that to mean like a driver's license?
That's what this statute says, regulating the operation of bicycles and requiring registration and licensing of them, including the requirement of a registration fee.
A licensing of the vehicle or of the driver?
TBD.
Could be either, I guess. So here, the way the statute defines an e-bike is, I think it's 750 watts.
Right.
Anything more than that, or anything that travels more than 20 miles an hour, is statutorily a moped. If you're under 21, you gotta wear a helmet, you gotta comply with the traffic laws.
Right.
Et cetera, et cetera. So if you see one going 40 miles an hour.
Cornet's right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you see, a lot of this came up because of just a few bad actors. And it's been my observation that the ones that are causing problems are well under 16 years old. And, I don't know, they all 12, 13 years old, whatever. And I'm very interested in that licensing requirement. I'd like to explore that further.
Well, and Mac,
But
is
not
that,
tonight, but,
sorry.
not tonight.
Yeah, I mean, is that
But that's a
something
question.
to attack at the
I
state
thought,
level?
I thought, is that something, as he said, the state level, or can we regulate that?
To me, the registration requirement probably makes more sense that before you're permitted to utilize one, that you have to come and show your age and register it, and all these bikes have specific labels that federal law prevents you from removing that defines the wattage, so they can look at it and say, all right, this is a moped, this is an e-bike. So in my mind, I think, helmet requirements, registration requirements, that all makes more sense. Where it gets a little murky is, this statute says you can do the licensing, but that's also South Carolina DMV, but I guess you could have an Isle of Palms e-bike license. Sounds like a lot more work for the staff.
Maybe that's something that we look at later on.
Yeah.
But that was my interest in it.
I agree. When it comes to the kids, I think we definitely need to look at that, but for now, I think
Yeah,
we're-
we'll take it. So we've got
Okay.
Jan.
Thank you. what other motorized vehicles do we permit on the street aside from those for handicapped people and police force, I guess?
On the
On the
street or on the beach?
On the beach, sorry.
We don't allow any motorized vehicles. There is an exception for folks that are driving a golf cart that have a handicap.
Yes, for handicap.
For handicap, they are exempted from that restriction. So only emergency vehicles are allowed to be on the beach.
Okay. So this would change the character of what kind of vehicle. This is a motorized vehicle. This is not just a bicycle. So,
I mean, it's how it's written in the ordinance.
yeah.
Other states too, there's like 3 different classes. There's ones that are like pedal assist, where you actually pedal. Some of them are just straight throttle. And then I think there's some that are where you can change that, and there's some that are straight throttle that go really fast. And so some municipalities have differentiated between class 1, 2, and 3 of the different categories of e-bikes, but
They're all motorized.
Chief, I see you back there nodding. Anything you need to add here?
No, sir, not that I think
Okay.
of. Do you have a specific question?
I think you're just nodding off.
I totally misread that.
Just following along.
Yeah.
Looking at the licensing and registering, those things, I was just following along with that. As far as the ordinance goes, it's,
Okay.
I would not, classification gets complicated. There's no way for me to know that on the beach. If I'm standing, there's a police officer and a bike comes by me, I'm not gonna know. That's-
Well, and that's what's so interesting to me about follies. You know, if the mode of acceleration is throttle only, and you're going to ask a police person to, I mean, that's crazy to me. I mean, I think,
If it's throttle only, I would believe there would not be pedals, but
Yeah.
for an e-bike, by definition, under state statute, has pedals and would have an electric assist
Yeah.
with it, so
gotcha.
that's where it would get complicated, because it does, once you get to certain wattage, it then could be considered a vehicle, like a moped. Once it hits that wattage and goes up. But again, for me as a police officer standing on the beach, I'm not gonna know unless I'm standing there with a radar.
Right.
Because there is a speed limit thing, and I could, but I'm not gonna put radars on the beach to find that out either. That's, they're cumbersome.
All right, so do we have the proper motion as amended for second reading?
That does.
Okay.
And we're ready to put all the.
All in favor?
All the whereases, yep.
And the whereases are going in.
All
Yeah,
those,
we will include some factual findings
yeah.
to justify the passage of this ordinance. We'll include it and distribute it to council.
Amendment first, is that right?
Yeah. So we're voting on the as amended. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
So now we need to vote on
The
the second
motion
reading.
as
Yeah.
amended.
So the motion as amended,
Make a motion to pass as amended?
Well, there was already a
Well,
motion
yeah,
on the
there
floor.
already was?
There was already a
Okay,
motion on the
sorry.
floor. We just voted on the amendment. And now it's as amended.
so we have a motion and a second.
The original conversation started
Yeah.
with a motion made by Councilmember Myers and seconded by Councilmember Hahn.
Perfect. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next.
The amendment overrides the motion, doesn't it? I mean, from the language.
You vote on the motion to amend,
Yeah,
to take out the
Yeah, I
times,
understand.
and now we're voting on it as amended.
as amended.
With the new
Correct.
language in.
Well, I vote nay on that.
That's why.
You voted nay on the motion on what he voted, he
Correct.
noted.
Correct.
Amended,
That one. You're voting on the final final as amended,
yes.
but you're fine with the motion to amend. I'm trying to
You're voting-
clarify.
No, I do
voting
not,
nay
I
on
was
each
not,
one.
I was not fine with either one. I would vote
You're
nay
no
on
on
each.
both.
Nay vote.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Jimmy. All right, next is ordinance 2023-08 to adopt a new noise ordinance. Scott, to your earlier conversation, we voted to defer. We need to take official action on the second reading here, so we need a motion.
I move to defer and send it back to the Public Safety Committee.
Second,
Further discussion? Good.
Yep.
Minor detail. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, back on the last one, I got the date wrong. It said May 15th instead of Memorial Day. Is that?
Well, I think we were saying
We were saying the
Memorial
same
of
thing.
Labor.
Got it. Well, in the ordinance, it said May 15th.
We're pulling that out.
Got it.
Pulling that language out and putting
Put it
in Memorial to
Okay.
Labor.
All right, that's fine.
All right, on the noise ordinance, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Ordinance 2023-09 to clarify position of city attorney and to include provisions of the appointment of city prosecutor.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Further questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Ordinance 2023-10 to authorize entering into an intergovernmental agreement related to South Carolina Local Revenue Services to participate in local revenue service programs, to execute participant program supplements, and other matters.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. First reading, ordinance 2023-11 to clarify that statements of candidacy for mayor and council members can be filed at City Hall.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second.
Title only, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Resolutions and proclamations, none, and there being no further business.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All for